Mark Ashton adjusted his tie in the mirror, his sharp features set with quiet confidence. At 32, he had built a respectable career. His wife, Brittany, sat on their bed, immersed in her phone. Dressed in an emerald gown, she barely glanced up. "The Worthington's gala starts in an hour. Are you ready?" she asked impatiently. Mark nodded, fastening his watch. "I might leave early. The community center project needs my attention." Brittany sighed, her disapproval clear. "These charity projects, they matter," Mark replied firmly. At the gala, Manhattan's elite mingled under crystal chandeliers. Brittany thrived in this world, seamlessly networking. Then, a familiar voice cut through the crowd. "Mark Ashton, the man who builds playgrounds while the rest of us build empires." Chad Sterling smirked, his designer suit exuding wealth. His father, Victor Sterling, stood beside him, exuding quiet superiority. Chad's gaze lingered on Brittany. "You look stunning. That dress is Valentino, isn't it?" Brittany beamed. "Good eye, Chad." Mark watched as she leaned in, engaged. His gut told him it was just socializing. Or was it? Mark's work consumed him. Late nights at the community center, Brittany's days filled with social events. One evening, hoping to surprise her, he arrived. "Home early. She was dressed to go out. Dinner reservations at Le Bernardin," Mark said. "Your favorite?" Brittany hesitated. "I have plans. The Sterlings are hosting a private event." Mark's chest tightened. "The same project Chad mentioned?" "It's networking, Mark," she sighed. "Maybe if you spent less time on charity and more on your career." The words stung. Doubt crept in. Then Daniel, his best friend and lawyer, confirmed his worst fear. "I saw Brittany with Chad. It wasn't business." Mark dismissed it, but whispers at events painted a different picture. Poor Mark, he has no idea. Then, one night he found Brittany's secondary phone buzzing on the counter. A message from Chad. "Miss you already. Can't wait for tomorrow." Mark scrolled. Hotel receipts, private jokes about his obliviousness. The betrayal cut deep. Brittany walked in, freezing at the sight of her, phone in his hand. "How long?" Mark's voice was cold. She exhaled, mask slipping. "Long enough." "Get out." She smirked. "Chad offers more than you ever could." She packed, leaving Mark in an empty penthouse, his world shattered. Divorce proceedings began. Brittany demanded a fortune. Mark didn't care, but Chad and Brittany turned their affair into a public spectacle. At an event, Chad sneered. "Still working on that community center?" Mark smirked. "And you, booking hotel suites?" Brittany's smile faltered. Chad laughed. Then, an unexpected call. George Ashton, his father. "I've been watching, Mark. It's time we talk." Mark hesitated. He had always rejected his father's empire. But maybe it was time to stop playing by their rules. Maybe it was time to show them what an Ashton was truly capable of. Mark Ashton was determined to build his success without relying on his billionaire father's legacy. But when his enemies, his manipulative ex-wife Brittany, her arrogant lover Chad, and rival tycoon Victor Sterling, conspired to destroy his reputation and sabotage his community project, his father, George Ashton, decided it was time for Mark to embrace the power he had long rejected. In a dramatic showdown, George fired Victor on the spot, revealing that Ashton Industries had secretly gained control over Sterling Innovations. As Mark watched his father effortlessly dismantle their enemies, he saw power in a new light, not just as influence, but as a weapon he could wield. Finally, he stepped into his rightful place as the heir to a corporate empire. 3 months later, Mark had evolved into a formidable leader, strategic, relentless, and respected. But his enemies weren't done. Brittany and Chad, desperate to regain control, launched a vicious smear campaign, using the press, false accusations, and corporate sabotage to undermine him. Cybersecurity expert Issa Rossi, uncovered an even bigger threat. Someone inside Ashton Industries was feeding information to their rivals. This wasn't just a business war, it was a personal vendetta. As Mark prepared to strike back, one question haunted him. Was he still fighting for justice, or had power become his obsession? George warned him that revenge could consume him if he wasn't careful. Now, standing at the edge of victory, Mark must decide. Will he be the leader his father always wanted, or will he become the ruthless titan his enemies fear? Mark hadn't intended for his words to cut so deeply, but the sting of truth was undeniable. He had changed. He could see it in the way people regarded him. With respect, yes, but also with a quiet apprehension. Even Daniel, his closest ally, seemed to tread carefully around him these days. That night, sleep eluded him. Frustration boiling beneath his skin, Mark found himself in the office gym, his fists hammering into the punching bag with controlled aggression. He was so lost in the rhythm that he didn't hear Isa enter until she spoke. "Your form is terrible." He stopped, breathing hard, and turned toward her. "Didn't know you were a boxing expert." "There's a lot you don't know about me." She stepped closer, adjusting his stance. "You're telegraphing your moves. Makes you predictable." "Like I am with the Sterlings?" She raised an eyebrow. "You said it, not me. But yes, you're letting them control your every step, playing right into their hands." Mark exhaled sharply. "And what do you suggest?" "Stop reacting. Start strategizing." She met his gaze, unflinching. "The Mark Ashton I first met wanted to build something, not destroy it. What happened to him?" The question hit harder than any punch. What had happened to the Mark Ashton who had once dreamed of building community centers and affordable housing? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "Emergency board meeting tomorrow. They're making their move." Mark glanced at Isa, who saw the tension in his face. "I need you to find the mole. Tonight." "Already on it." She hesitated, then added, "Whatever happens tomorrow, don't forget who you are. Don't let them turn you into something you're not." He watched her leave, her words echoing in his mind. Somewhere along the way, he had lost sight of his purpose. The real question was, could he find it again without losing everything he had built? The boardroom buzzed with unease as Mark took his place at the head of the table. 24 pairs of eyes watched him, some filled with concern, others with calculation. George sat to his right, his expression unreadable. "This emergency session will now begin," the board secretary announced. "We are here to discuss recent concerns regarding company direction and leadership decisions." Mark's phone vibrated silently. A message from Isa. "Found the mole. You won't believe who it is. Bringing them in now." Mark rose, buttoning his jacket. "Before we start, there's a matter that requires immediate attention." The boardroom doors swung open. Isa strode in, tablet in hand, followed closely by security escorting a struggling figure, Janet Chun, head of Asian operations and one of Mark's most vocal critics. Mark's voice was calm but carried an undeniable weight. "Ms. Chun, would you care to explain the $10 million deposited into your Cayman Islands account? Or shall I?" A collective murmur spread across the room, Janet's face drained of color. I don't know what you're talking about." Isa stepped forward, projecting financial records onto the screen. 3 separate payments, all traced back to shell companies owned by Sterling Innovations, in exchange for confidential Ashton Industries data. That's impossible. Is it?" Mark circled the table slowly. "Just like it's impossible that you've been feeding information to Chad Sterling? That you've been orchestrating this entire smear campaign? You can't prove—" "Actually," Daniel interrupted from the doorway, holding up a file. "We can. The evidence has already been sent to the SEC. They're very interested in speaking with you." Security escorted the Stunned board member from the room, Mark turned to face the others. Ladies and gentlemen, you've been deceived, led to believe that my actions were harming this company, when in reality, Sterling Innovations was the true threat, working from within, with help from some of you. Uneasy whispers filled the room as Mark let the weight of his words settle. But that ends today. He brought up fresh projections. While you've been questioning my leadership, Ashton Industries has increased market share by 15%, secured international clean energy contracts, and created thousands of new jobs. George watched his son with something close to admiration as Mark delivered the final blow. So the choice is simple. We can waste more time playing their game, or we can focus on what matters, growing this company, creating value, and making a real impact. The vote that followed was unanimous. Mark retained full control. As the board members exited, Daniel approached, phone in hand. The SEC is moving in on Sterling Innovations. The evidence is irrefutable. Chad is trying to liquidate assets, but we've frozen most of his accounts. Legally, Issa joined them, her tablet displaying the latest updates. Their entire network is collapsing. Even Brittany's journalist friends have turned on them. Mark nodded, satisfaction battling an unexpected hollowness. Make sure Janet Chun's cooperation with authorities is widely publicized. I want everyone to understand the cost of betrayal. The city stretched out beneath Mark's office as the fallout unfolded in real time. Sterling Innovations crumbled. The Sterlings were disgraced. It should have felt like victory. Yet, as he stood there, George's voice broke the silence. You handled that well, though I suspect you knew about Chun's betrayal before today. 3 days ago, Mark admitted. Issa found the evidence, but we needed the right moment. Dramatic, George chuckled, but effective. The board won't challenge you again. They never should have in the first place. George studied his son. You've changed, Mark. The board sees it. I see it. The question is, do you? Before Mark could answer, his phone lit up with an urgent message. Chad Sterling is holding a press conference. On the screen, Chad's face appeared, pale, sweating, struggling to maintain composure. Brittany stood beside him, her usual poise, slipping. Sterling Innovations is the victim of a coordinated attack, Chad declared. These allegations are false. Mark spoke into his phone. Send it. Chad faltered as his phone buzzed. His face paled further as he read the message. Mr. Sterling, a reporter called, can you comment on the evidence proving your company's illegal activities? Another journalist pushed forward. And the bribery allegations? The SEC investigation into your personal accounts? Chad's confidence shattered. No comment. This press conference is over. Brittany tried to pull him away, but the damage was done. Within minutes, the footage went viral. Issa smirked. Perfect timing. Sterling's stock is in free fall. Daniel arrived, legal documents in hand. The SEC is moving in. Victor Sterling just offered to testify against his own son in exchange for leniency. Mark watched the chaos unfold. He had won. But as he stood in the tower he fought to protect. One question lingered. At what cost? Issa's face was tense. The surveillance team just checked in. Brittany arrived early, alone. But she's been making calls, a lot of them, and we can't trace who she's talking to. Mark processed the information. Keep monitoring. If anything feels off, we shut it down immediately. Issa stepped closer, adjusting his tie slightly. Be careful. Her fingers lingered a second too long. Mark caught her hand before she pulled away. I will, he promised. The Manhattan skyline sparkled behind them, but Mark barely noticed as he approached the table where Brittany sat. Dressed in a simple black dress, her usual flashy jewelry was missing. Thank you for coming, she said. Let's skip the pleasantries, Mark cut in, sitting across from her. What was so important that you wanted to speak to my father? Brittany glanced around, then leaned forward. What I'm about to tell you could change everything, but I need assurances first. You're in no position to make demands. This isn't about demands, she whispered. It's about survival. Yours, mine, all of ours. Mark studied her face, looking for deception. Explain. Chad wasn't working alone. Neither was Victor. There's someone bigger behind all of this. She slid a small USB drive across the table. This contains proof. Proof of what? Brittany's hands trembled. Ashton Industries has been a target for years. Everything that happened, to you, to us, it was part of a larger plan. Mark's phone buzzed. A message from Issa. Something's wrong. The drive is emitting a signal. Do not touch it. Mark's instincts kicked in. He stood, buttoning his jacket. This meeting is over. Mark, please. Brittany reached for his arm. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. He signaled his security team. That drive contains malware, doesn't it? A Trojan to infiltrate. Ashton Industries systems. Brittany's face crumbled. They made me do it. They said if I didn't. Who made you? Who are you working for? Before she could answer, chaos erupted. Gunshots. Glass shattering. Screams filled the rooftop as Mark was tackled to the ground by security. Through the chaos, he caught a glimpse of Brittany, being dragged away by unknown figures. Her last look at him wasn't anger. It was fear. As Mark entered, he saw Brittany quietly greeting them. After serving 3 years of her sentence, she had changed. No longer the social climber chasing wealth, but someone determined to make amends. Now she taught art therapy, helping troubled children find hope through creativity. Later, in his office, Mark reviewed reports. Ashton Industries was no longer just about profit, it was about impact. Daniel, now Chief Legal Officer, updated him on their latest projects, affordable housing, tech training centers, and social initiatives. The empire Mark once sought to destroy had become a force for good. Chad's up for parole next year, Daniel mentioned. Mark barely reacted. Some people never changed. Others, like Brittany, found redemption. As they left for dinner, Mark reflected on his journey. Once fueled by vengeance, he had chosen to build instead of destroy. Now, his work transformed lives, turning abandoned neighborhoods into thriving communities. At dinner, Daniel raised his glass. To old friends. And new beginnings, Issa added, smiling. That night, Mark stood on his balcony, Issa by his side. Any regrets? She asked softly. None, he said, feeling the gentle kick of their unborn child. Revenge would have made me like them. This made me better. Years ago, he had sought power to tear down his enemies. Now his legacy was one of creation, not destruction. True victory wasn't about winning battles. It was about changing lives. And in that, he had found his greatest triumph.